So just to go over a little bit quickly in terms of what Brian covered, that just to make a couple of announcements in terms of the DREAM Act is not being deferred action. A lot of students, when they come in, I work as an AB 540 counselor at San Francisco State, and a lot of them are telling me, I already did my DACA application thinking that that is actually somehow with the DREAM Act. So just making sure that those two are very separate, and that doing their DACA application does not affect their AB 540 status, and that's the criteria that they're going to be using for the California DREAM application. So just in terms of an overview, this is also was spoken of before in terms of AB 540 allowing students to do, non-resident students to pay in-state fees. AB 130, which passed in July, allowing colleges to be able to have private funds that they would give to students beginning in January 1st of 2012. And now starting this year in January 1st of 2013, actually the state-funded grants for students which will be available to them at the CSU, the UC, and the community college. So just to go over quickly in terms of what kind of aid that actually means, for AB 131, the California State Financial Aid Programs, it means that for this year, in January 2013 or spring 2013, that they have eligibility for university grants at the UC, the CSU, and the community college. The amount varies by the schools, and in terms of how they do their actual the crunching of their numbers for that, but it usually covers state fees. And then beginning in the 2013-14 academic year, for undergraduates, there'll be Cal Grant A, Cal Grant B, Cal Grant C for vocational programs, and students will also have the eligibility to compete for EOP grants. And these are some of the funds in terms of the lower number is usually at the four-year CSU, and the higher number for the Cal Grants can be, these are this year's funds, but that would be for the UCs or the private schools. In terms of for the University of California, I talked a little bit about the state university grant options that they already have, but there's also a lot of eligibility for aid that came through AB 130. So there's the UC scholarships, the criteria can vary by campus, but there is a lot of institutional aid that was opened up through 130. At the CSUs and at the community colleges, it's a little bit more of a step-by-step process. At San Francisco State, 5 scholarships now use the California DREAM application and were open that previously were not. But at the UCs, it just seems like there's a lot more institutional funds that students can take advantage of. And then the other exciting thing at the University of California is that students who got permission to work in the United States through DACA can actually get university work study. It's not federal work study, but they have the opportunity for institutional funds, which makes that available for people. And there are a limited number of campuses that are also offering university loans. Again, institutional funds that would be available for students when they apply to the colleges. In terms of an application overview, when you're looking at the DREAM App application, or what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to talk about when and how to apply, an overview of the application itself, who should fill out the application and not, talking again about dependent and independent students, trying to highlight some of the specific problems that we've noticed in terms of if students have already filled out the DREAM application, how to make sure students successfully submit the application, some of the resources available, and then we just want to touch on who is it that you will train. Because we're so excited that you're here today, and we're trying to do as much as we can to get information out to students across the state, but just trying to get your support in terms of doing that. So I'm going to be talking about a lot of things today, and if you don't remember, I talk kind of fast, so I'll try to slow down, but if you don't remember all the different things that I said, the one thing that's super important that I hope that you're able to remember is March 2nd. Having students submit their California DREAM application by March 2nd is essential for the California State Universities. It's essential in terms of having them have the eligibility for the Cal Grants, and it's helpful in terms of for the UCs also, they're asking students to try to meet their deadlines. There might be a little bit more flexibility with the UCs, but for the Cal Grants and the CSUs, if you miss this deadline, that bus is going to peel out and your students are not going to be on it. So we want to make sure that you remember that March 2nd. Technically, because March 2nd is a Saturday, the true application deadline is really March 4th. But please don't tell anybody that before March 3rd, okay? We're really trying to keep people on this idea that it's the same cycle as which the FAFSA is. January and February are the times to fill out the FAFSA or the DREAM. So please have students try to meet that March 2nd deadline. The online application is available. I was actually told yesterday that it's January 23rd. Brian said today that it's going to be January 22nd. It was open for that little second. I was one of those students in there trying to check out the application on the 16th, but it had to close again. So it will be available online from January 23rd through March 2nd. And at caldreamact.org. The paper application, as Brian said, is currently available, but we are encouraging students, if they can, to just wait a little bit longer and fill out the online application, because the online application is actually a lot faster. So this is actually a screenshot of the previous 2012-13 application. The 13-14 is really spiffy, and it's much more easier to use, it seems, but there's the online application as well as the paper application, which is available right now. We're encouraging you students to use the online application because it's easier to ensure that the information is submitted and check quickly in terms of whether it's been submitted. But if students are going to be mailing in their application, please make sure that it's postmarked by the deadline date. And I'm also encouraging students, if they can, to get a certificate of mailing from the U.S. Post Office, because it proves that you mailed the information by the date, and it only costs $1.15. So $1.15, very well invested. Excuse me one sec. For the California community colleges, some students, there's actually a special application for AB 540 students for the BOG fee waiver, which is a Board of Governors Grants fee waiver. That's available for students right now, beginning in January 1st of 2013. Some of the schools, college by college, are actually using the special BOG application in conjunction with the California Student Aid application. Others of them are using it as a standalone. So you should check with your community college in your area in terms of what are the steps that they want students to be able to complete. Because for students in terms of the 12-13 academic year, for the CSUs, last year, students had to complete their application by May 18th. However, for students that are going to the community college this semester, they can fill out the application as of today. So there wasn't any previous filing that was necessary. And when we're just talking about an overview of the California DREAM application, this is basically, the beginning of it is going to be talking about should these students be doing the DREAM application or the FAFSA. And then they're going to go into student questions about income, demographics, determining whether they should have their parents or not, submit their application, their information on the application. If students are considered dependent students, parent questions and income information will be put in there. If they're independent students, they'll be guided to fill out the student household size. They're also going to have them do college selection, a parent signature, and really important that they go ahead and check the confirmation page. So in terms of who can fill out the DREAM application, only AB 540 students and U visa holders should be filling out the DREAM application. And in terms of they'll be able to see that on there, they attended the 3 years of high school, they graduated from a California high school, and that they have submitted the affidavit that's required by the school. And in terms of AB 540 qualifications, it's not just that they think that they're AB 540, but that the school has actually classified them as an AB 540 student at the CSU, the exemption affidavit, present official high school transcripts which show 3 years and 6 semesters of high school and a California high school and graduation, and also receive confirmation back from the school that they've actually been classified as an AB 540 student. Some schools do that by email, some of them send letters, so the student just needs to make sure that they're actually classified as AB 540 because that is a requirement that was actually written into the bill of AB 130 and 131. If students are eligible non-citizens, then they should actually be filling out the application. Eligible non-citizens should also would include T visa holders, but it's refugees, people with asylum granted, Cuban, Haitian entrants, conditional entrants, parolees, and then also, like I said, the T visas. And the application itself will actually be checking and saying what is the citizenship status for the DREAM application. They must be able to choose the third option, not a citizen or an eligible non-citizen, to be able to go ahead and have their DREAM application processed. So if they actually fill out, I'm a U.S. citizen, or I'm an eligible non-citizen, they should not continue to fill out the DREAM application. They should just go ahead and fill out the the FAFSA. And for those of you who are already familiar with the FAFSA, the DREAM application, they really tried to make it a mirror application, so that the information and the questions that they were asked are all very similar information. The format's very similar. So, and they also have these great tabs up on the top that allow students to kind of check in terms of where they are within the application, very similar to what the FAFSA is. So in terms of whether students should have their parental information or not put their parental information into the DREAM application, it's the same as the FAFSA. It's based on age, it's based on marital status, whether they have their own children or dependents for whom they provide their financial support, if they're attending graduate school, they're active in the armed forces or the veterans, or they're court-certified minor by the state of California, or their legal guardian or in foster care. But this is really important that students, it must be verified by the court in California. So I have a number of students who filled out the application at our school, and they filled out that they were under legal guardianship because before they left their country, their parents did sign some kind of affidavit or document giving their care or to an older sibling or another family member. Unfortunately, that does not count for the DREAM application or for the FAFSA. So it's really important that these are actually verified by the court, any of these additional statuses here in California. And I know we have a lot of students who have parents who are actually living in other countries. So a lot of students that I've spoken with are like, well, my parents aren't here. What am I going to do? How should I submit their application? Or can I just do it on my own? The idea that the parents live in another country actually does not have to do with whether they have to put their parental information on there. Adoptive parents and biological parent information must be under there unless they meet some of those, they become an independent student based on the categories we discussed before. So students with that kind of situation, they should fill out the application. The parents should fill out the application online if they would have access to the internet. If not, they would need to work with the student to complete the information online, talking to the parent on the phone or via the mail system. And then parents should indicate that they file foreign taxes and convert that money to US dollars. So if my mom was living in Mexico, then I would have to be talking to my mom on the phone or via email or however I could speak with her. And then I would have to, and then she would talk about the kind of income that she received, and I would convert that into US dollars and put that information on there. And then if she had access to the internet where she was, I could work with her to actually help her to get her own PIN, because they would like to submit it with a PIN if possible, but if not, a student can complete their application, print out the parent signature page and get that to their parent in the country in which they're in. But they would have to return that, sign it, and have them return that to CSEC prior to March 2nd. So it's really important that students kind of like get on the job early because not just the application needs to be submitted, but it needs to be signed by both parents and submitted by the March 2nd deadline. So in terms of some of the documents that are necessary to complete the California DREAM application, if it's applicable, they should have W-2 forms or other records of income, 2012 tax returns, if the students or the parents are filing tax returns, records of any child support that was paid, and then records of scholarships if they are actually reported on the students or the parents' taxes. Scholarship should not be reported on this unless they're actually indicated on the taxes that students have. They should have current investment records if they have them. If they happen to have a business of over 100 employees, they would have to include that too. And then bank statements if those are applicable. If parents don't have these specific documents but they still earn income, they still would be required to report that income on the application. In terms of household income, students must report income and any cash support that they receive given by relatives except for food and housing. So it's really important that all income be reported on there. And if the student is under 24 years of age, then their parents must also report their income and any cash support that are given to them by relatives, except for food and housing. And so that's going to be true again for parents. Students will need to include their parents' information unless the student is married, has their own children, or going to graduate school, or meet those other requirements. And a number of students will be chosen to actually do verification of household income. So if students or parents meet the income guidelines by the IRS that are given out, which last year was $9,250, if they earn more than that, they can be required to present an IRS tax return or a W-2 or 1099 forms. And just to remind people that if students are like, oh, how can I file taxes? What can I do? Of course, they can always file taxes with their ITIN or their individual tax identification number. They can get more information about that at irs.gov, but E4FC on their website through the Life After College Guide also has a great description of the documents that you would need and the steps that you would need to take to fill out an I-10. So if for students that their parents don't file and they're like, should I do the application, shouldn't I do the application? I would encourage them to go ahead and do the DREAM application, just with the knowledge that if they are selected for verification and they make over the income limit, their parents might have to file taxes at that time to be able to present the verification that the schools and the government is requiring. So again, I just want to remind you guys in terms of this March 2nd deadline, because it's super important, like I said again, for the California State Universities and for the Cal Grants. If people miss, and UCs are also encouraging, it's important for the UCs as well, and you don't want your students to be left on that bus that's going to be peeling out. But all of you, as you guys know, taxes are going to be due not until April 15th, so a lot of people won't have completed their taxes by the time that the March 2nd deadline comes along. But not to worry, people can just go ahead and indicate that they will file their taxes, put in the income and estimate the income, perhaps estimating what the income was from 2011, or doing a quick calculation of what they think that they earned in 2012. Submit the application to meet the March 2nd deadline, and then after their taxes are filed, they just go back to caldreamact.org, update it from will filed to already filed, and then input the actual numbers. So that way, parents and students don't have to freak out and get their taxes done really early, but they can still meet the March 2nd deadline, complete their taxes when they're due in April 15th, and then just go back and update the information that's required. In terms of changes for the 2013-14 application from the 2012 and 13-14 application, there is not going to be any more student PIN. So they're not going to have a student personal identification number like they got from their application for the 2012 and 13. They're actually going to get a username and a user ID, and that's the information that they will always use to be signing into their application. Also, there's going to be Cal Grant information and Chafee Grant information that's included on the application. And you can see the student aid report right on your DREAM application after it's submitted. It's also really easy for students to be able to identify should they be filling out the independent or the dependent application. And the look and format is definitely a lot more user-friendly, and it's easier to follow, and there's a lot more prompts. In the same way that the FAFSA has that sort of guide along as you put your cursor into the different questions, information or that you need to provide is actually put in a sidebar. That's also true now for the California DREAM application for 13-14. In terms of applying for the Cal Grant, it's really important, like I said, 100 times, that they submit the California DREAM application by March 2nd, and they also need to complete a non-SSN Cal Grant GPA verification form and have that submitted by the deadline. Now, I know there's a number of students who I've spoken with who tell me, oh, well, I have a social security number now. Should I be doing the FAFSA, or can I use the SSN for the Cal Grant? But no, I've been told by Cal Grant, and Brian can confirm, that for students, in terms of their social security number, it's not valid for education, so Cal Grant does not even want students to be using it in terms of applying for the California DREAM application. So many districts will be using this non-social security number GPA submission, not only for their Dreamer students, but also for other students that they just don't want to use their social security number as an identifying factor. It's going to be submitted by batch process, and if you want to know, hey, how do we do that? Is my school participating? Then Adrian Felix is, and this is their phone number and contact information, or just calling the general CSAC information and asking for school support. You can get information to see whether your school district is actually going to be submitting that information en masse. And some of the schools who are actually doing this, there's a lot of different school districts who are already doing that. So if you're in one of those school districts, you're like, yes. And if you're not, then maybe you could advocate with your own district to see if it's possible for them to submit that kind of batch information. Otherwise, the student would individually be required to print out their non-SSN GPA verification form, bring it to the school where they've met the unit requirements, and then actually submit that by the March 2nd deadline. As Brian was indicating before, it's important that men know that between the ages of 18 to 25, they have to register with the Selective Service to meet eligibility requirements, and students should register at the U.S. Post Office. They can mail in a Selective Service registration postcard, because they're not able to use the social security number that they got through DACA to be able to go to the SSS.gov and register online. They need to submit that through the postcard. And again, I'm encouraging students to get that certificate of mailing, because their grant will be held up until they provide proof that they actually they did the registration. If students are over the age of 26, just in the way in which citizens do if they did not register between the ages of 18 to 25, they need to document why they were not able to register or did not register, and they can get more information about the process for doing that at sss.gov. The application itself also does indicate right on there that students need to register. I've talked with a lot of students now who've been awarded grants and they're like, oh, I didn't know I needed to register, but it actually says right on the application, if you're male, males need to register, and that they could go ahead and get that information from sss.gov. So in terms of some common problems that we've seen with applications, then many times the student name doesn't match. So in the same way in which the name at the school has to be the exact same name on the application. So students should just be checking, it's got to be their legal name, but just to make sure that there's concordance in both places, both at the school and on their dream application. Another common problem, people miss the deadline. They weren't aware of the May 18th deadline for the CSUs, or they didn't know that it was there. So it's really important, that's why I think it's really good that we've gotten onto the same cycle as the FAFSA. So January and February, like I said, students should be filling out their dream or their FAFSA application. A lot of the applications that we saw had their parent signature missing. And it could be kind of confusing because it was hard to get that. Sometimes it was easy to miss the PIN, but just really important that students are looking when they put in the way they submit their information for the parent PIN, that they actually look at the next screen because the PIN number will come up there immediately, but if they don't capture it then, it's really hard to get it back again. So we'll be talking about that more in the next slide. Also, again, like I was saying, if a student is in legal guardianship but it's not recognized by the state of California, that's a common problem that we've seen too. They'd have to go back and resubmit their application and make sure that they put in their parent information. Or another problem is that students are not classified as AB 540 students at the college. So really important that they go ahead and make sure that all of their paperwork is in order at the college as well. And at the CSU system, and specifically at San Francisco State, we've also had some delays in terms of if students already have social security numbers on file with the school, students are matching their dream ID with their student ID, and the social security number can create a little bit of an extra delay. So that's just a problem that we've seen. For successfully submitting the application, the student is going to choose their user ID and their password, and this will substitute as their PIN this year. So really important that they write that down, that they remember it. It's great that once you choose your user ID and you put in your email, CSAC is actually going to send you information, an email that says what your user ID is, but you don't want to forget it. Parents are going to have to add their parent signature. So the student's going to sign into their account. The parent is actually going to put in their parent name, their birth date, and their wages to create a parent PIN. So the name and the wages and the birth date all have to match. So it's really important that if you think, oh, it was about $35,000 that we had for income, but it was actually $35,400, it might not match. We want the students to check that before they go ahead and ask the student to ask for their parent PIN. And when they put in that information, what happened last year is that the PIN actually came up on this little block that said, okay, and in little language in there, it says, this is your student PIN. So if the student went through really quickly and they're like, submit the PIN, okay, and they thought they were going to get the PIN next, they could miss the parent PIN. So really important to do that slowly and capture that information. And also at the end, there's a confirmation page, so they should actually check the confirmation page to make sure that the parent PIN and the student PIN, and the student signature were successfully submitted. Also really important just to help the student remember that they're the ones that are responsible to check their application status. They can check it again at the California Student Aid Commission at caldreamact.org, as well as checking their information and the status at the school. They're going to be able to list a whole number of schools on their DREAM application so that they actually go to all of the individual schools that they're seriously considering attending and make sure that the school is not waiting for any financial aid documents. Were they selected for verification? Is there a signature missing? And that the students just really need to be proactive and make sure that they're checking their status so that they can make sure that they get their grant money that's due. In terms of where to get help, there's a lot of different places to get help. Starting off with the California Student Aid Commission. I apologize that I put that wrong. It's csac.ca.gov. That's for the California Student Aid Commission. And there's this great number, 888-224-7268. I don't think they have caller ID, which has been really helpful for me because I practically have those guys on speed dial. There's only a little bit of time. There's certain hours that you can get information from them, but I found them to be very helpful when you give them a call. And then you can also just get information from the financial aid offices by the website, calling them in on the phone, getting an email or in person. There's also resources that are available right online. We have the California DREAM Act instructions, so you can actually just go on there and grab the DREAM Act instructions. There's a California DREAM Act worksheet, so students are chomping at the bit and they're like, I don't want to wait until January 22nd. Have them fill out the worksheet and get the information necessary so when the application opens online, they're just like, boom, they're on it. Or you can actually have them go ahead and do the steps of the California paper application. But like I was saying, it will be, if they send in a paper application, they're going to have to wait for somebody at CSAC to input that information and then be able to process it. So it's much quicker if they can just do the application online. You also got some guidelines today that I created from the actual instructions and just kind of like tips and dirty, like the down and dirty in terms of what the main information is that you would have students, that you could give to students in terms of filling out that application. And if you, like, wait, I want another sheet of that, we actually have that listed on our AB 540 website at San Francisco State. So you can definitely check that out. There's also a lot of UC resources that are available. The UC resource at ucal.us/dream gives information for the whole UC system. There's also the specific website for UC Berkeley, or you could just do dream@berkeley.edu and get information back there as well. So just in terms of who you train, we're really hoping that a lot of you guys are already high school and college counselors. Could you help train your coworkers? Could you train teachers? Can you train fellow students? What if you brought this information to someone from the financial aid office and telling your friends? Because we really want to make sure that you share what you learn and make the commitment to train at least one other person, or better yet, set up a training at an application drive at your college, your nonprofit, your local high school, community college, university, or just at your neighborhood center.
Part of the money is federal money, but a portion is state money. So what we did on the DREAM Act application was just put in some questions to help us identify that student population. By completing that, then we know we can take the next step in determining their JFE eligibility.
Wow, that's great, thank you. Also very briefly, the non-social security number Calgrant GPA verification, is that form available on the CSAC website?
It's on the CSAC website under GPA.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, great. For our community college representative, students who complete the ability to benefit test at the community college, instead of completing a high school diploma or GED, can they qualify for the California DREAM Act?
So there is a certain number of students who were enrolled in eligible programs prior to the change in the federal law that could still, because they were enrolled prior to the change, take that ability to benefit. They are eligible to apply to the DREAM Act.
Okay, but new students won't be eligible.
New students who started programs after July 1st would not be eligible.
Okay, thank you.
So I had a really quick question. I know earlier you had discussed that non-public institutions will be collecting the AB 540 affidavit and also the various other things that come in regards to the California DREAM Act. But they said that, I was wondering, does the student request it on behalf of the institution, or is the institution, because they are private institutions, are they going to be having accessibility like a state and public school?
Because we anticipate that not every school will have an affidavit, the Student Aid Commission has a generic affidavit that we believe would meet the requirements for AB 540. So the student could probably complete that, but I think they should check on the website at the private school and find out if they've got procedures that they want to have followed.
Okay.
And we do it 72 different ways. So let me start with the first. My recommendation is that you work directly with the admissions and registrar's offices on our college campuses. They make the determination of whether students are eligible under AB 540 for non-resident fee exemption. Once that determination has been made internally, those students are flagged in our system as eligible to apply for financial aid.
For some of the schools, I think it'll be a little bit easier the second year than it was the first year. There was a long delay at San Francisco State, and I believe at some of the other CSUs as well, while we were able to try to match up information or build a new system to bring that information in. So I think the second year is going to be a lot quicker, but I'm not sure that it's actually going to be, I think it'll be school specific, but that's certainly what we're aiming for.
I'd also say normally at the UCs, we give students their offers of financial aid at the same time as their admissions decision, but based on what I just said, we wouldn't have made the AB 540 determination at that time. So I know what most of us are doing are putting a conditional award on that says, you know, this is conditional on actually receiving the AB 540 fee waiver or equivalent status, and at that time, then a final package would be on. So while we're aiming to make it the same time frame, also, as Nancy said, matching the identity of the student to the school is a little more challenging without the Social Security match. So if there can be some delays for individual students, I would just say they should contact their school.
The Student Aid Commission, in response to their DREAM application, will be notifying them on the application that they're Cal Grant eligible. And typically, any student who is Cal Grant eligible in the community college system is also fee waiver eligible. So anybody who's advised that they're eligible for a Cal Grant. Now, beyond that, there may be students who weren't Cal Grant eligible that filled out a DREAM app, that when the application is evaluated, may still be fee waiver eligible. So those determinations and those advices will be provided to students in normal time frames locally. If you work with a specific group of community colleges, for example, Peralta's all within a district, they probably all process and begin to send out award letters in the same time frame. If you're over on the peninsula, the same thing would be true with the colleges in the San Mateo district. Thanks. So again, it really depends on which community colleges you're working with, assuming that most of the ones you're working with are going to be in the local context.
It's something that I try to facilitate for the students to be able to have access quickly to all the forms. And so my first comment is if you could kind of streamline that so that they could have access to the forms online. And then the second thing is, if I went to the community college system, who would I be able to speak to in terms of like an office that's going to handle that? And then for the UCs, what office or link could I go to? And then for the CSUs as well, like do you have any links? And then what's the link for the Student Aid Commission to get that affidavit form?
We do have a copy of the form available online, although students would need to download it and sign it, and then either upload a PDF back to us or fax it in or mail it in. You could search for it if you just go to the Berkeley website and do a search for AB 540, you'll find the form. I also have some yellow golden flyers over there that might be of some help. But in general, each UC campus will process the affidavit, so usually we wait until students make a commitment to that campus before processing it, so doing it too early isn't all that helpful.
At San Francisco State, we do have the affidavit online. We also have an AB 540 website where the affidavit is prominent, but also in terms of searching for it, if you search for the non-resident tuition exemption, we all use that shorthand and call it the AB 540 affidavit, but the actual language is called the non-resident tuition exemption form. So it's really important that students can look for that. And then that often can be through the CSU. It would be found on the admissions website, all under residency information, so that they just go onto the application, the admissions website at any of the CSUs and look under residency, they'd be able to find that. For our school, we've been working very closely with the residency coordinator, and we're developing a system now that we're actually wanting students to turn in the affidavit earlier, not because it will be processed prior to high school transcripts being sent, but so that we can identify that those are students who we should actually be contacting. So students should go ahead, specifically at San Francisco State and at other schools, they might want to send in an affidavit now, and then go ahead and send another affidavit in once the final high school transcripts are submitted.
And then you mentioned that some schools might be offering student loans to DREAM applicants. Is there a list of those schools, or is it really just individually reaching out to all of them?
So our interpretation at UC was that any institutional aid that you were making available for other students, you should be making available for these students. So only some of the UCs currently have institutional loan programs. Unfortunately, Berkeley, we're not one of them. They really should reach out school by school. I tried to reach out to my colleagues to get the list before this, and I'm sorry not everyone got back to me, but I know, for example, UC San Diego is a school, San Diego, that has institutional loans. I can try to get that list and send it to the coordinators.
I just wanted to make one more announcement, which I forgot to put into my application. For the California State Universities, students are eligible to receive this at the graduate level for the state university grant. Is that true also for the UCs? No. They don't have such a thing. So that's just for the CSUs, but students who will be going into graduate school at the California State University in 13-14, if they apply for the DREAM application by the March 2nd deadline and meet the income deadline, then they can be considered for a state university grant, which will cover the majority of their fees in graduate school. So I'd like to thank you all today for coming. Thank you so much to our panelists for the information, and we look forward to having you with us.